Hi, I want to thank you for taking the time to learn more about iLeasePro and its integration with Sage Intacct. This integration will help simplify the adoption and transition to the ASC 842 Lease Accounting Standard for you and your company. I'm John Meadson, Managing Partner of iLease Management, the developer of iLeasePro. Over the next 15 minutes, we will talk a little bit about iLease Management, a high-level overview of the FASB ASC 842 Lease Accounting Standard and how it may impact non-public companies like yours. We'll review and demonstrate the integration between Sage Intacct and iLeasePro, and then we'll finish up with a few key iLeasePro client testimonials and success stories. So a little about who we are. iLease Management LLC is located in Massachusetts. We founded the company in 2012 specifically to develop the best cloud-based lease accounting and lease management solution. Not only to help companies comply with this new complex accounting standard, but also to offer lease management and analysis capabilities to support an increase in productivity and decrease the risks associated with lease accounting and the legal requirements of leasing. I would also like to mention that iLease has been a Sage Intacct marketplace partner since March of 2018. Let's transition into the technology solution. iLeasePro is a cloud-based lease accounting and lease management solution that is intuitive, cost-effective, and accurate. iLeasePro's capabilities and features include ASC 842 lease accounting, lease management, and lease analysis. We've been talking a lot about the ASC 842 standard and how iLeasePro helps companies comply to it. But for those of you who don't really know what this new standard is about, we're going to talk a little bit over the next couple slides. Over the last few years, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, or FASB, made effective the ASC 842 Lease Accounting Standard for both public and private companies. This new standard fills in the gaps that the board felt were missing in the current GAAP lease accounting standard. Under the new standard, a lessee will be required to recognize and report the right-of-use asset and lease liabilities for virtually all leases. The lease liability is based upon the present value of the lease payments over the lease term. Short-term leases, those leases that are less than 12 months, can be excluded from this requirement. I'm sure the first thing you're thinking about is, when do I need to comply with this? Well, it has to be now, unfortunately. The effective date for public companies was at the end of 2019, but the ASC 842 standard became effective for private or non-public companies for annual reporting periods after December 15th, 2021. So how are we going to comply to these new changes? Well, my recommendation would be through the integration of iLeasePro and Sage Intacct. These two solutions are tightly integrated via Web Services API, so there is no need to do any exporting or importing of data. It's a simple, seamless upload and download. Or you don't have to worry about customizations. And there is no additional cost to a current Sage Intacct user to use this integration. What I'd like to do right now is a demonstration of iLeasePro and the integration with Sage Intacct via lease accounting. We will focus just on lease accounting for now, but there will be a link at the end of this webinar that you can visit to learn more about the lease management and lease analysis features if you're interested. We'll talk a little bit about the implementation and setup, and then we'll get into the actual lease accounting process. Let's start from where the user logs in. To make changes to the setup of iLeasePro, we click on the admin link. You only need to run through this step process one time. To begin the setup for lease accounting, you would enter your operating entities by clicking on the Subsidiary tab. These are the entities that you have set up in Sage Intacct for lease accounting. Next, click on the Lease Accounting tab. To begin the integration between iLeasePro and Sage Intacct, we need to select Intacct as the partner accounting software. Enter in your login credentials to Sage Intacct and click on the Validate Account. You can find detailed implementation and setup instructions by clicking on this link here. Next, for each operating entity or subsidiary entered, we need to enter in the general ledger accounts that you've already defined in Sage Intacct. iLeasePro will use these general ledger accounts when we build journal entries. Then we click on Dimensions. Now that we know we have a connection with Sage Intacct, we can begin by downloading the dimensions from Sage into iLeasePro. Simply click on Load Intacct Dimensions button, OK, and it will begin the process to download your dimensions into iLeasePro. Okay, now that we've set up iLeasePro for the integration with Sage Intacct and Lease Accounting, let's go take a look at how we use Lease Accounting at the lease level and the portfolio level. To start the process of Lease Accounting, we need to add a new lease. Click on the Add Lease button, and you can toggle between adding a real estate lease or an equipment lease. We will begin by using a lease that's already been added. All of the required fields entered when you add a new lease are captured within iLeasePro so that you don't have to retype them. You can see here that all of the date fields have been added. Next, we need to set up the rent table. When we build the rent table, we add the payments that we are planning on making throughout the lease term. You can specify lesser allowances and any escalations that are defined in the executed lease. Click on the payments table to view the monthly payments that are automatically created from that rent table. These are the payments that are used to build the amortization schedule. This is also where we set up the lease payment parameters. Certain parameters are pulled down from Sage Intacct so that when you do select them, you're selecting the equivalent parameters that are already defined in Sage. Click on the dimensions to start linking specific dimensions to each lease at the general level account. You can see that we have all 8 standard dimensions to be selected from, and then you can enter in or select from the specific dimension that has been downloaded for each of the general ledger accounts. Next, we click on the Accounting tab. This page we'll use to define the ASC 842 parameters that instruct iLeasePro how to calculate the amortization schedule for the lease. Select the appropriate operating entity. If you're unsure of the classification that should be used, we have a lease classification wizard that was built using FASB guidance to help determine which classification the lease falls under, operating or finance. Enter in relevant information regarding the lease, answer the questions, and you'll receive the recommended lease classification that you should be using. Enter in the relevant borrowing rate, and the present value is automatically calculated, as well as the journal entries and the amortization schedule. We can view the amortization schedule by month, by day and month, or throughout the entire lease term. And the amortization schedule can be exported to a CSV by clicking this button. We can also build journal entries for the lease at this page. And you can see here's the journal entry that's built automatically from that amortization information data. And then we can upload this journal entry directly into Intacct by clicking on this button. You can see this was uploaded. Now we'll go take a look at Intacct. And now we'll see after the upload of the journal entries, we just logged into Sage Intacct. We'll go take a look at the journals. Select the iLeasePro journal. We'll take a look at just for the month that we define this. And you can see the journal entry has been uploaded. The journal entry includes all of the key fields, the dimensions, the details, and then we have a memo or what we call the journal entry ID that you can use for reconciliation purposes. Additional journal entries that can be built: variable payment, and the accounts receivable for one operating sublease. Now, this was at the lease level where you only created journal entries for one lease. We also have the portfolio level accounting where you will come in, you can select by subsidiary if you wanted to select by groups within that subsidiary or for the entire account. You specify the classification of the leases that you'd like to build the journal entries for. You can select all three if you like, for the month in the year. And you'll see that we built a batch of journal entries for all of the leases in the account that can simply be uploaded into Intacct. And our last integration point is payments. So the monthly payment feature gathers all of the rent and variable payments for a year and a month across the account. You can include or exclude payments. You can roll over to see what the payment parameters are, and you also can add payment notes on each individual payment. Click on Upload. So the payments are being uploaded directly into the Intacct AP Bill module. Upload successful. Let's go take a look at Sage. So we're back on Sage Intacct, and let's take a look in the AP Billing module for those transactions. So these are the transactions that we just uploaded for the month of June. You can set each lease either to be posted or as a draft for review. We typically set it as a draft at the beginning. You'll see the information, all of the critical information is passed along with the vendor and any other dimensions that are specified. And when you're ready to adopt the ASC 842 standard, you can use the iLeasePro transition feature to enter in your ASC 840 adjustments, select your date of transition, and then lock the system down so that you can move forward under the ASC 842. And what this does is, in your first month of journal entries, in this case January 1st, 2022, when you do the journal entries for January 1st, 2022, iLeasePro will build the initial journal entries under the ASC 842, as well as the offsetting ASC 840 adjustment journal entries for you. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to gain a better understanding of iLeasePro and its integration with Sage Intacct. In addition to becoming compliant to the Lease Accounting Standard, you should see improvements in productivity of managing your lease portfolio and should feel secure that you'll be mitigating and removing some of the risks associated with leasing. Let's finish up by hearing from some of our clients.
I can start off with saying that I love iLeasePro. I did a lot of research before I ended up choosing iLeasePro. And I can tell you one of the main things at the end of the day of why I wanted iLeasePro was the ease of use of it, and also the cost. I thought with the benefit that I got, some of these were extremely expensive for the number of leases that we had. Anytime that I needed extra help, you have tons of training documents out there. And when the training documents, I got to a point that maybe I was like, I need a little more help on this. All I had to do was email. You immediately got back with me. And if that wasn't enough, then you got on the phone with me. So I felt like the transition from an Excel spreadsheet to the system was wonderful. And then the benefits is the reporting capability of it as well has been great. And I'm not having to use the spreadsheets anymore.